You're not thinking clearly, Mom. You're confused. It's for her safety. She wanders at night.
I was locked in my own bedroom when I heard my son sell my house. The deadbolt he'd installed 3 days earlier, for your safety, Mom, clicked shut from the outside that Sunday morning. I'd come home from church and found it shining above the lock I'd used for 30 years. He said it was because I was getting older, because I might wander at night, because he loved me. I believed him then. I sat on the edge of my bed at 74, listening to his voice carry from the living room, smooth, bright, too practiced. 1.5 million, he said. Great neighborhood, 4 bedrooms, original hardwood. Huge backyard, motivated owner. We can show it this week. My house. He was describing my house like it belonged to him. My hands shook as I slid open my nightstand and pulled out the prepaid cell phone I'd hidden beneath a stack of hymn bulletins. He'd taken my regular phone 2 days earlier. Too many scam calls, he'd said, then pocketed it like it was his. I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered, "I'm locked in my own bedroom. My son did it." She asked for my address. I gave her the street name, afraid he'd hear the number. Behind my words, his pitch kept going. Easy showing, move fast, listing today. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line. Then my son laughed, low and confident, and said, "If you want it, we can make this quick." And I understood. He hadn't locked me in for safety. He'd locked me in for silence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to when things still felt normal, when I still believed my son wanted what was best for me. My name is Margaret. For 8 years after my husband Robert died, I lived alone in the house we bought in 1983, a 4-bedroom colonial in Ridgemont, the kind of suburb where the trees arch over the streets, and people still wave when you bring your mail in. Robert and I raised our children inside those walls. We paid the mortgage off in 2001. After he passed, I considered selling and moving someplace smaller, but the house was mine, free and clear, and I wasn't ready to let go of the life we'd built there. Every Sunday, I went to St. Catherine's for the 10 o'clock service. I sat in the same pew, 4th from the front on the left, where Robert used to sit beside me, his hand warm over mine during the hymns. Afterward, I stopped at Clark's Bakery for honey wheat bread, then came home to make lunch. It was ordinary, it was steady, it was mine. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. My teacher's pension covered the bills. I had some savings, a modest IRA, and the kind of calm that comes from knowing your lights will stay on. 2 years earlier, a real estate agent had knocked on my door and told me houses in Ridgemont were selling for over $1 million. Mine, she said, with the original hardwood and the big backyard, could go for 1.5, maybe more. I thanked her and closed the door. I wasn't selling. I didn't know that one Sunday would become the last time normal felt like a promise. David started coming by more often about 6 months before everything fell apart. At first, I was glad. He'd been distant after his divorce, busy with work, trying to get his consulting business off the ground, he said. Then suddenly he was stopping by every weekend, sometimes twice a week. He brought takeout. He offered to fix things that didn't need fixing. He stood in my kitchen and looked at me like I was a fragile object someone had set too close to the edge of a table. One evening, while I put groceries away, he leaned against the counter and said, casually, like it was small talk, "You know, Mom, you're not getting any younger. Have you thought about what happens if you fall? Or if you forget to turn off the stove?" I reminded him I was 74, not 90. I walked 3 miles most mornings. I balanced my checkbook by hand. I'd lived alone for 8 years without incident. I know, he said, palms up like I was being difficult. I'm just saying, you should have a plan, just in case. Just in case became his favorite phrase. Just in case I got sick. Just in case I needed help. Just in case something happened. Then his questions shifted. Not about my knees or my blood pressure, about numbers. How much was my pension? Did I have long-term care insurance? Was my will up to date? He said it softly, carefully, dressed in concern, but every question felt like an audit. Like he was taking inventory of a life he didn't own. His concern felt wrong, like shoes that didn't fit. One Tuesday in late September, he came over for dinner. I made pot roast, his favorite, because old habits die hard. Halfway through the meal, he reached into his bag and placed a folder on the table between our plates. I brought something for you to look at, he said. Inside was a power of attorney document. His name was already typed in as the agent. All that was blank was my signature. It's just a precaution, he said quickly, like speed would make it harmless. In case you ever can't make decisions for yourself, medical stuff, financial stuff, standard. I read it slowly, line by line. It gave him authority over my bank accounts, my investments, my property. It gave him the right to make medical decisions on my behalf. The language was broad enough that if I signed, he could act even if I was perfectly capable of acting for myself. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. I don't think I need this right now. For a second, his fork stopped moving. His jaw tightened. Not a dramatic change, just a small one. The way a mask shifts when the face beneath it is tired of holding still. Then he smoothed it away. Mom, it's not about need. It's about being prepared. What if you have a stroke? What if you can't communicate? I'd be able to help you right away. Isn't that what you'd want? I'll think about it, I said. I told him I'd think about it. He didn't like that. When he left, he didn't take the folder with him. He left it on my table like a weight. It sat there for 3 days before I finally put it in a drawer, unsigned, telling myself I was overreacting. He was cautious, overprotective, loving even. But that tightness in his face stayed with me. Not the look of a son worried about his mother, the look of someone who didn't get what he came for. That night, I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out my deed, not because I didn't know the house was mine, but because I needed to see it in ink. The deed was dated June 14th, 1983. Robert's name and mine, together. After he died, I'd updated it. Now it was only my name. Margaret Ann Brennan, sole owner, no liens, no mortgage, no co-signers. I also pulled the appraisal I'd ordered for insurance 2 years earlier. $1.4 million printed plainly on the page. With the market the way it had been, it would be closer to 1.5 now, maybe more. I sat at my kitchen table with those papers spread out like evidence, and I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding. David knew exactly what this house was worth. He'd asked about it before, casually, during those new dinners. He'd even joked once that I was sitting on a gold mine. I'd laughed because mothers laugh when they want a conversation to stay warm. This didn't feel warm anymore. The house was mine. That's what he couldn't stand. I pulled into my driveway at 11:15. The service had run long. Father Mike had preached about trust and family, about how we were called to care for one another. I drove home with those words still sitting on my chest, telling myself I'd been too harsh with David, telling myself to be grateful. David's car was in front of my house. He was on the porch like he'd been waiting for me. "Hey, Mom," he said, bright as sunshine. "I wanted to catch you before you got settled in. I did something I should have done a long time ago." He nodded toward the front door. A brand new deadbolt gleamed above my old lock, silver, heavy, the kind you see on a safe. I recognized the name stamped on the faceplate when I leaned closer, Schlag. top of the line. "It's for your safety," he said easily. "This neighborhood's changing. There've been break-ins 2 streets over. I want you secure." I hadn't heard about any break-ins. I checked the neighborhood Facebook group every morning. I knew who'd lost a cat and who'd complained about leaf blowers. No one had mentioned a thing. "I didn't ask you to do this," I said. "I know," he replied, as if I'd missed the point. "You shouldn't have to ask. I'm your son." I reached into my purse for my keys, the same ring I'd carried for 30 years, worn brass and familiar weight. I slid the old key into the old lock. It turned. The door moved an inch and stopped. The new deadbolt was already thrown. I stared at it, then at my keys, like maybe I'd suddenly forgotten how doors worked. "Do I have a key for that?" I asked. David patted his pocket, casual. "Oh yeah, I've got one for you, and I kept a spare, just in case," he said, just in case, like it was a lullaby. He stepped forward and unlocked it. One clean turn, the mechanism clacking like a final decision. He opened the door with his hand still on the knob, like it belonged to him now. I walked past him into my own house, and I hated the fact that my cheeks were warm with humiliation, the way they used to get when I was a little girl asking permission for something that was already mine. I had to knock on my own front door. Over the next few days, I started noticing changes, small at first, the kind you could blame on bad luck or technology. But I'd spent my life teaching 8th graders to look for patterns. I knew what a pattern felt like. My landline stopped ringing. When I picked it up, there was a dial tone. But when I called my home number from my cell, it went straight to voicemail. That didn't make sense. I checked messages and found 12 I'd never heard. Women from church, my sister in Ohio, the dentist confirming an appointment I'd made 2 weeks earlier. Their voices were polite at first, then confused. "Margaret, it's me. Are you okay?" Someone had forwarded my calls, then my email password stopped working. I tried it carefully. Same letters, same numbers, the same combination I'd used for years. Incorrect, incorrect, incorrect. Like a door I'd always opened without thinking had suddenly been bricked up. By Thursday, my mailbox was empty every day. I walked into the post office and waited in line under the humming fluorescent lights, telling myself it was a delivery issue. The clerk tapped on her keyboard, then frowned at her screen. "Your mail is on hold, ma'am. 2 weeks." On hold? I didn't request that. She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. An online form, my name typed in, my address. A check mark next to hold mail. A note that said I'd be out of town. I wasn't out of town. I left the post office with my stomach tight and my hands cold, as if my blood had decided to drain away on its own. That night, I took the kitchen trash out and stopped, the bag hanging from my fingers. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the held mail. Maybe it was the way David had started moving through my house like he had a job there. But I set the bag down, opened it, and began to dig. Coffee grounds, onion peel, a crumpled paper towel, and then a thick, cream-colored business card with raised lettering that caught the light like a warning. Marcus Whitfield, Luxury Home Specialist, Bridgemont Realty Group, specializing in high-value estate sales. Luxury Home Specialist, my home. I turned it over. On the back, someone had written in pencil, October 28th, 2 p.m., bring comps. October 28th was 5 days away. I stood there in the kitchen, card in my hand, and listened to the refrigerator hum. The house had never felt so quiet. Not peaceful quiet, watchful quiet. The next morning, while David was out, I called the number on the card. A woman answered on the second ring, bright and professional. Bridgemont Realty, how can I help you? I'd like to speak with Marcus Whitfield, please. May I ask what this is regarding? I chose my words the way you choose a path through glass. A property consultation? Ridgemont. There was typing, then a small pause, like a hinge catching. "Oh yes, are you calling on behalf of Mr. Brennan?" My throat tightened. "Mr. Brennan, not Mrs. Brennan, not the homeowner." "Actually, I'm the owner," I said. "And I'm not selling." The typing stopped. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Whitfield has an appointment scheduled to assess the property and discuss listing options." Mr. Brennan was very clear that, "I don't care what Mr. Brennan was very clear about," I cut in, my voice steadier than my hands. "The house is mine. I am canceling that appointment. There is no listing. There will be no showing. Do you understand me?" A beat of silence. "Yes, ma'am," she said, the brightness gone. "I'll note it." I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone like it might bite. David had already moved beyond ideas. He'd made calls, he'd scheduled time, he'd set a date. That evening, I didn't cook, I waited. When he came in, he smelled like outside air and confidence. He tossed his keys into the bowl by the door like he lived there, then stopped when he saw me. The business card sat on the coffee table between us. "We need to talk," I said. His eyes flicked to the card. Just a flicker. His eyelid tightened, his mouth paused. Then the concerned sun returned like a curtain dropping. "Where did you find that?" "In the trash," I said. "Where you put it?" He lowered himself onto the couch slowly, clasping his hands as if we were about to pray. "Mom, I was going to talk to you about this. I've been thinking about your situation. This house is too big. The maintenance, the taxes, it's a lot. And with the market the way it is, you could sell and get a great price. Move somewhere smaller, safer." "This is my house," I said. "I'm not selling." He exhaled through his nose, controlled. "I know it's hard, but you have to be realistic. What happens when you can't manage anymore? What if you fall? What if—" "Stop," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I walk 3 miles every morning. I pay my bills. I make my appointments. I don't need you arranging a sale behind my back." Something in his face shifted. Not dramatic, just the way warmth drains when it's no longer useful. "You're not thinking clearly," he said quietly. "You're confused." My stomach turned cold. "I understand exactly what you're doing," I said. "You're trying to sell my house without telling me. I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" He held my eyes steady as stone. "From yourself," he said. He looked me in the eye and lied. That night, I heard a sound I'd never heard in my own home. I was in bed with a book open on my lap when footsteps passed in the hallway. Then metal slid into wood. A small final click. I got up and tried the knob. It wouldn't turn. There was a lock on the outside of my bedroom door. I stood there in my nightgown, palm pressed to the brass, and felt the air in my lungs turn thin. "David," I called, keeping my voice even. "Why is my door locked?" His voice came through the wood, calm, too calm. "It's for your safety, Mom. You've been wandering at night. I don't want you to fall." "I don't wander," I said. "I've never wandered." "You don't remember," he replied, like he was reading from a script. "But you do." That was the moment the word safety stopped sounding like love. It started sounding like a cage. The click of that lock was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The next morning was Sunday, October 29th, and I woke up already listening, not to birds, not to the furnace, to silence that felt staged. I swung my feet onto the floor and tried my bedroom door. It didn't budge. He'd locked it again, this time from the outside, in daylight, like it was normal, like I was the problem to be managed. "David," I called, keeping my voice steady. "David, I need the bathroom." No answer. And then, downstairs, I heard him. Not footsteps, a phone voice, that bright salesman tone that didn't belong in my home. "Absolutely," he said. 1.5 million, 4 bedrooms, original hardwood, huge backyard. Ridgemont's still one of the best pockets. The owner's motivated. We can get photos this week. My breath went thin. Because he wasn't talking to a friend. He was talking to someone who could put a sign in my yard. I stood with my forehead against the door and realized something simple, humiliating, and true. He didn't need my permission if he could convince the world I wasn't capable of giving it. My hand went to the nightstand without thinking. I slid open the drawer and felt the hard edges of the old flip phone I'd kept hidden like a spare heartbeat. I'd charged it in secret. I told myself it was silly. It wasn't silly anymore. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers and whispered before fear could turn into hesitation. "Please don't hang up," I said. "I'm locked in my bedroom. My son did it. And he's downstairs trying to sell my house." The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional in a way that made me want to cry. "Ma'am, what's your address?" I gave it. I gave my full name. I said my age, 74, like it mattered, like it proved something. "Are you injured?" "No, not yet, but I can't get out." "Is your son in the home right now?" "Yes," I whispered. "He's in my living room." And then, like the universe wanted to make sure I'd be believed, David raised his voice downstairs, close enough that the dispatcher heard it through my phone. "No, she's fine with it," he said, laughing softly. "She knows it's time. This house is too much. Assisted living's probably the next step. We can list by the end of the week." There was a brief pause on the line. The dispatcher didn't have to ask who that was. "Ma'am," she said, lower now, "stay where you are. Officers are on the way. Do you have a key to the lock? No? Do you feel safe staying in that room until they arrive?" I looked at the door, the knob, the shadow underneath it, the fact that it opened only from his side. "I don't feel safe," I admitted, "but I'll stay." She kept me talking, simple questions that anchored me to the moment. What he was wearing, whether there were weapons in the home, whether I had anyone nearby I trusted. Downstairs, David kept selling my life in neat bullet points, square footage, motivated seller, quick close. The recording caught every word. He didn't know. A few minutes later, I heard the doorbell. David's steps crossed the foyer. The front door opened. "Mr. Brennan?" a man's voice said. "Officer Martinez, Ridgemont PD. We got a call from this address. Is your mother home?" There was a beat of silence, just long enough to hear David decide which version of me he wanted to present. "She's upstairs," David said smoothly. "She's confused sometimes. I'm just trying to keep her safe." I pressed my palm to my mouth to keep from making a sound. "We need to speak with her directly," Officer Martinez said. Another pause, then footsteps on the stairs, keys, metal. The lock on my door turning like it had every right to exist. David opened it and smiled the way you smile at a child who's made a mess. "Mom," he said softly, warning tucked into the kindness. "What did you do?" I walked past him without answering. At the bottom of the stairs, 2 officers stood in my entryway. Martinez and a younger woman whose badge read Patterson. Their eyes moved quick and careful, taking in the house, the tension, the way my hands shook, even when my voice didn't. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez asked, "are you Margaret Brennan?" "Yes." "Can you tell me why you called 911? I didn't dramatize it. I listed it. The new deadbolt, the call forwarding, my email password changed, my mail held at the post office. He took my car keys, and he locked my bedroom door from the outside. Officer Patterson's gaze flicked to David. "Sir, did you lock her door?" "It's for her safety," David said instantly. "She wanders at night." "I don't wander," I said evenly. "I walk 3 miles every morning. I had my annual physical 3 weeks ago. My doctor said I was in excellent health." Officer Martinez nodded once, like a small internal door had just closed. "Can you show me the locks?" he asked. I led them upstairs and showed them the bedroom door, how it only turned from the hall side. Then we went back down to the front door, and I pointed at the deadbolt David had installed, shiny and new, above the old lock. That's when I saw it. Officer Martinez's expression change, just slightly. Not anger, recognition. Back at the kitchen table, he wrote while I spoke. Dates, times, details, the kind of writing that turns fear into a record. "Mrs. Brennan," he said when I finished, "I'm filing a report. Keep this case number." He tore a small strip from his notebook and slid it to me. "Case none the 24th of October, 2947. Also," he added, "I recommend you speak with an elder law attorney as soon as possible. Today, if you can. This, what you described, can become a property fraud situation quickly." Fraud. He said it like a fact, not an accusation. My throat tightened, not from panic this time, but from relief. Because someone in a uniform had finally used the word I'd been afraid to say out loud. After they spoke to David separately, after he was told very clearly to return my keys and stop restricting my access in my own home, I went upstairs to pack a small bag. Not because I wanted to run, because Officer Martinez had been honest. The next 72 hours mattered. On my way past the guest room, I saw David's laptop open on the desk, and beside it, fresh paper still curled from the printer tray, an MLS listing draft, my address at the top. Charming 4-bedroom colonial, original hardwood floors, spacious backyard, and one line that made my stomach drop all over again. Motivated seller. The listing was already written. Monday, October 30th, I woke up in Barbara's guest room to the smell of chamomile tea and the dull ache that comes after adrenaline wears off. My purse sat on the nightstand like a lifeline. My keys returned, my flip phone still charged, the scrap of paper where Officer Martinez had written 3 names and 1 reminder. Keep the case number, document everything. Case number the 24th of October, 2947. Barbara drove me to the first attorney on the list. Her office was 20 minutes away, tucked into a quiet professional building with frosted glass doors and a brass plaque that read, "Rebecca Chen, SQ, Elder Law, Protective Orders." Inside, everything sounded sharper than it should have. The click of Barbara's heels on tile, the soft hum of a copier, the whisper of paper sliding into a file folder. Rebecca Chen met me in the lobby herself. She wasn't stern in the way television lawyers are. She was calm, focused, the kind of calm that made me feel like the room had walls again. She didn't sit behind a big desk. She sat with me at a round table and opened a yellow legal pad. "Mrs. Brennan," she said, pen poised, "start from the beginning. Tell me what you saw, what you heard, what you can prove." So I did. I told her about the new deadbolt David installed after church, about the call forwarding on my landline, about my email password suddenly not working, about the mail hold request I never made, about the realtor's business card I found under coffee grounds, about the lock on my bedroom door on the outside, and then I told her about Sunday, about sitting on my bed at 74, listening to my son pitch my home like it was inventory. 1.5 million, I said. 4 bedrooms, original hardwood, motivated seller. Rebecca's pen stopped moving. "Do you still have that 911 recording?" she asked. "The police have it," I said. "They filed the report. Case number the 24th of October, 2947. She nodded once, like a judge marking a point. Then I slid the worst piece across the table. The listing agreement I'd pulled off David's desk, my address, the asking price, and, in his handwriting at the bottom, power of attorney on file. Rebecca didn't flinch. She just tapped the page with the end of her pen. "Did you sign a power of attorney?" "No." "Did a court declare you incapacitated? Guardianship? Conservatorship?" "No." She leaned back. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Then he has no legal authority, she said. Not over your home, not over your accounts, not over you. I felt something hot behind my ribs. Anger, yes, but also something cleaner. Permission. Rebecca reached into a drawer and pulled out a copy of my deed that I'd brought with me, the one with my name alone on it. She ran a highlighter over the owner line, like she was underlining the truth for the room. This, she said, is your anchor. And this, she tapped David's note again, is a lie he wrote down. I swallowed. Can he do what he's been doing? Locking me in, taking my keys? No, she said, sharper now. That isn't care, it's control. And the fact that he's trying to sell the house makes it financial exploitation. She paused, then said the sentence I didn't know I needed to hear. This isn't caregiving, this is theft. The words landed like a gavel. Rebecca flipped to a clean page on her pad and started making a list as she spoke. Here's what we do first, she said. Immediately. First, we put the realtor and broker on notice, a cease and desist letter stating I was the sole owner and no one else had authority to list, market, or show my property. Second, we revoke any power of attorney he claims exists. Even if it's forged, we file a formal revocation so every bank and provider knows he is not my agent. Third, we flag your title. We notify a title company and the county recorder that any transfer, lien, or recording attempt must trigger direct contact with you. Fourth, we build the timeline, the locks, the mail hold, the listing draft, the 911 audio, the police report. And then she looked me in the eye. And we bring in adult protective services, she said, because if he tries to paint you as confused, we need an official record that says you are not. I thought of David's voice. You're not thinking clearly, Mom. I thought of the way he said it, so smooth it almost sounded like concern. How fast? I asked. Rebecca glanced at her calendar. Today, she said. We can draft and send today. That was the first time since Sunday that I exhaled and didn't feel the air shake. I signed a retainer agreement with hands that still trembled, and then I watched Rebecca work. The printer woke up with a whir, paper slid out, warm at the edges. The paralegal stamped dates, clipped copies, and slid each packet into an envelope, like we were building armor out of stationery. Rebecca dictated the cease and desist letter line by line, and I heard my address spoken aloud like a claim. 428 Millbrook Road. Not David's, mine. At the end, her paralegal laid the certified mail slips on the table. Rebecca pointed to the green cards. Return receipt, she said. So he can't pretend he didn't know. I watched the paralegal press the certified mail stickers down with her thumb, each one making a small tearing sound like tape pulled from a roll. Receipts, proof. The language David always used to trap me, paperwork, was now the thing that would protect me. When we finally stood, 6 envelopes were stacked in a neat pile, ready to go out the door. Rebecca handed me copies and said, "Keep these somewhere safe, not in your house while he still has access." I nodded. "Barbara has a lockbox." "Good," she said. "We're already ahead." The next morning, Tuesday, my phone rang while Barbara and I were drinking coffee. "Mrs. Brennan?" a woman asked. "This is Adult Protective Services. We received a referral regarding concerns of isolation, confinement, and attempted financial exploitation." My stomach tightened anyway, even though I knew this call was for me, not against me. She offered a home visit the next day. Wednesday afternoon, an APS caseworker named Linda Okoye came to Barbara's house. She carried a notebook and a calmness that reminded me of the dispatcher. Steady, practiced, unshakable. Linda didn't treat me like glass. She treated me like a person being interviewed for the truth. She asked me the date, the day of the week, who the president was. She asked me what I ate for breakfast, who paid my bills, where my mail went, who had access to my accounts. Then she asked about David. I told her about the bedroom lock, about the keys, about the realtor card, about hearing him say motivated seller through my own door. Barbara stayed in the kitchen, giving us privacy, but I could hear the kettle click off and the quiet clink of a spoon against a mug. Linda watched me answer, not just listening to my words, watching how I formed them. When she finally closed her notebook, she didn't soften the truth to spare my feelings. "Mrs. Brennan," she said, "you are oriented, you're consistent, you understand what happened and why it matters." I swallowed. "So I'm not confused?" Linda's expression didn't change, but her tone did. It warmed by 0.5 degree. "No," she said, "you're not confused. You were isolated and manipulated. That's different." Something in my chest loosened so suddenly, I had to look down at my hands to keep myself steady. "I'm going to file my report today," she continued. "If he tries to claim you can't manage your affairs, this assessment becomes part of the record." She slid a paper across the table with an APS case number on it and a direct line to her office. "Keep this," she said, "with your police report number, with your attorney's documents. Together, they tell one story." After she left, Barbara put a fresh cup of tea in front of me, without asking if I wanted it. I stared at the APS paper, the case number, the words that mattered most: competent, capable, no evidence of impairment. That evening, Rebecca called. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said. I could hear traffic faintly on her end, like she was walking back from court. The revocation and the notices were filed and sent, certified, return receipt. My fingers tightened around the phone, and, she added, "I filed for an emergency protective order. We're on the calendar for Friday morning at 10. Friday, 3 days before my son would be formally told, by paper, by procedure, by the system, that I wasn't backing down. I set the phone down and looked at Barbara's front door, at the ordinary lock that turned from the inside like a promise. In my mind, I saw David at my mailbox, holding an envelope stamped certified mail, staring at my name on the return address. And I realized something that made my voice go quiet, even in my own head. He'd used locks to make me feel small. Now I was using paper to make him stop. Friday was coming. The day after APS finished my assessment, I stopped waiting for permission. Thursday afternoon, November 1st, I called a locksmith. His name was Tony. He arrived at 4 o'clock in a white van with a metal toolbox that clanked when he set it on my porch. Barbara drove me and waited in the car at the curb, the engine idling like a promise I could leave if David appeared. Tony looked at the deadbolt David had installed. Silver, overbuilt, too proud on my front door. "You want this one out?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and I want the new one to belong to me." The drill started with a high, hard whine. Metal screamed against metal. I flinched, then forced myself not to. I watched him work the way I'd watched my husband fix things for decades. Focused, patient, unromantic. 12 minutes later, the deadbolt dropped into Tony's palm. He held it up. "This is the one causing trouble. This is the one that kept me asking to come into my own life," I said. He installed a new deadbolt, solid, clean, the kind that turned smoothly without sticking. When he finished, he placed 2 keys in my hand. "Only 2, I told him. He nodded like he understood why that mattered. Then only 2. At his clipboard, I signed the invoice and watched him write my name carefully. Margaret A. Brennan, 428, Millbrook Road Service, lock replacement, front door, date, November 1st. Total, $240. "You're the only name on this invoice, ma'am," Tony said. I stared at that line a moment longer than I needed to. Then I put the paper in my folder with my police report number and APS paperwork. And I asked Tony for one more thing. "Bag the old deadbolt," I said. He lifted an eyebrow. I didn't explain. He slid it into a plastic bag anyway, like it belonged in evidence. I kept the old deadbolt. Evidence. While Barbara drove me back to her house, my phone buzzed twice in my lap. I didn't have to open it to know who it was. The screen lit with his name, David, and went dark again. A few minutes later, Rebecca called. "I have Marcus Whitfield on the line," she said. "I'm putting him on speaker so you can hear this." I sat at Barbara's kitchen table. Barbara stood at the sink, rinsing mugs without making a sound. Rebecca's voice stayed calm, professional calm, the kind of calm that made other people sound ridiculous when they lost control. Then Marcus Whitfield spoke, tight and angry. "I don't understand what's happening," he said. "Mr. Brennan assured me this was a straightforward estate sale. He said his mother was moving to assisted living and wanted to liquidate the property." Rebecca didn't raise her voice. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "Mrs. Brennan is my client. She is 74, fully competent, and she has not authorized any listing or sale. Any statement her son made to you suggesting otherwise was false." Silence. "He said he had power of attorney," Marcus finally snapped. "He does not," Rebecca said. "And now you have formal notice that he does not. If you list this property, show it, or accept offers based on his representations, you put your license, and your broker's license, at risk. Do you understand?" More silence, thicker this time. "The listing was supposed to go live tomorrow," Marcus said, quieter. "Then I suggest you make sure it doesn't," Rebecca replied. A click. He hung up. Rebecca exhaled once. "That listing is dead," she told me. "He won't gamble his career on your son's lie." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt cold. Because somewhere my son was realizing the world wasn't going to accept his version of me. 2 mornings later, I walked into courtroom 3B. It smelled like old paper and floor polish. The benches reminded me of church, wooden, orderly, built for silence. Rebecca sat beside me at the table. On the other side, David sat with a man in a gray suit, his attorney, who looked like he'd already decided this case was a bad idea. I hadn't seen David since the police came. When his eyes found mine, his face did something small, involuntary, like a smile tried to appear and couldn't. Judge Halstead entered, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain. She settled into her chair and looked down at the file. "Mrs. Margaret Brennan, petitioner," she said. "Mr. David Brennan, respondent." Her eyes lifted. "Miss Chen, proceed." Rebecca stood. "She didn't perform. She organized. Police report. Case Nevas, 24th of October, 2947. APS assessment confirming I was competent. The locksmith invoice with only my name on it. The cease and desist letter. The listing agreement I'd found on David's desk with power of attorney on file, scribbled in his handwriting. Then Rebecca said the sentence I'd been holding my breath for since Sunday. "Your Honor, we ask to play a portion of the 911 recording." The courtroom went still. A bailiff set a small speaker on the table. It looked too ordinary for something that could change my life. And then my own voice filled the room, small, frightened, unmistakably me. "I'm locked in my house. My son locked me in. I can't get out." The dispatcher's voice, steady, procedural. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger?" "I don't know," my voice said, "but he's selling my house. He's trying to take everything." And then David's voice, clear as day in the background, confident, smooth, practicing ownership he didn't have. "Yeah, the listing agreement's ready," he said. "We're shooting for 1.5, maybe more if we stage it right. Open house next Sunday, maybe the Sunday after." When the audio stopped, the silence that followed was heavier than the sound itself. Judge Halstead looked over her glasses at David. David's face had gone pale. His hands were clasped too tightly in front of him, knuckles white. "Anything else, Miss Chen?" the judge asked. "One witness, Your Honor," Rebecca said. Barbara took the stand. Barbara didn't dramatize. She didn't editorialize. She did what good witnesses do. She placed the truth in the room and let it stand on its own. She told the court she'd known me for years. She told the court my routine, Sunday service, bakery, lunch at home. She told the court she'd seen the new locks. And she told the court about the day she saw a realtor on my lawn, camera in hand, clipboard in the other, taking photos like my home was already a product. The truth spread faster than his lies ever could, I thought as Barbara spoke, because I could almost feel the air in the room shift. Judge Halstead turned to David's attorney. "Does your client have a power of attorney?" she asked. "No, Your Honor." "Does he have a guardianship order?" "No, Your Honor." "Did he have written permission to restrict his mother's access to her home or to contact real estate professionals on her behalf?" The attorney's shoulders sank a fraction. "No, Your Honor." Judge Halstead nodded once, as if the case had decided itself. She looked at me. "Mrs. Brennan," she said, "the evidence is clear. You are a competent adult. What occurred here was unlawful confinement and attempted financial exploitation." Then she looked at David. "Mr. Brennan, I'm granting a protective order," she said. "No contact, no access to her residence, no contact with financial institutions or real estate professionals on her behalf. Effective immediately." David swallowed. "Do you understand?" the judge asked. His voice came out thin. "Yes, Your Honor." "And if you violate it," she said, "you will be arrested." She closed the file like she was closing a door he no longer had a key to. As the clerk began the next case, Judge Halstead said the line I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The recording speaks for itself. Rebecca called me a week after the hearing. "I thought you should know," she said. "I pulled the public filings. With your permission, I had a colleague confirm the details. David filed Chapter 13 2 months ago." I sat down at Barbara's kitchen table with the phone pressed to my ear. The ceramic mug in front of me was still warm, but my hands felt cold. "Bankruptcy?" I said. "Yes," Rebecca replied. "Divorce settlement, a defaulted business loan, credit cards. Altogether, it's a little over 300,000. 300,000. It landed in my chest like a weight. "The plan requires monthly payments," she continued, "for years. I'm not telling you this to excuse him. I'm telling you because it explains why your house became a target. That's the size of the hole he was trying to fill." I closed my eyes and saw his voice on that 911 recording, smooth, confident, pitching my life like a product. 1.5 million, my way to sleep at night, his way out. "Does it change anything?" I asked. "No," she said. "The protective order stands, and I've taken 2 additional steps to protect the property." I heard papers shift on her end, an attorney's music. "Title company has been notified," she said. "They've placed a fraud alert on your address. Owner contact only, and the county recorder has a note on file to contact you directly if anyone tries to record anything unusual. If someone walks in with a forged signature, it won't slide through quietly." A small sound came out of me, half breath, half relief. "And the listing?" I asked. "Cancelled," Rebecca said. "Broker confirmed in writing it won't be placed on MLS. If anyone shows up claiming there's an open house, call the police. But right now, that door is closed." When we hung up, I sat there a long time, staring at the hook by Barbara's back door, where she kept her keys. Just keys, ordinary metal, until someone decides their power. I thought of David at 20, lanky, hopeful, talking about the future like it was something you could build with your hands. I thought of him at 30, wearing confidence like a coat, telling me his consulting business was going to take off any day. And then I thought of him at 45, drowning in debt, reaching for my house like a rope. I understood why. I still said no. 2 weeks later, Rebecca called again. "He's been trying to reach you," she said. "Not directly. He knows he can't. But he asked if you'd agree to one supervised meeting here, one conversation, your choice." I looked at the protective order copy in my folder, my name at the top, his beneath it, the judge's signature like a lock that only opened in my favor. "I don't have to," I said. "You don't," Rebecca confirmed, "and you can stop it at any moment." I took a full day to decide, not because I missed him, because I needed to know what kind of man was standing where my son used to be. So I said yes. We met at Rebecca's office on a Thursday afternoon. David sat on one side of the round table, I sat on the other. Rebecca sat at the head with a legal pad, her posture saying this wasn't a family moment, it was a documented one. David looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. The same gray suit from court hung a little loose at the shoulders. He kept his hands folded, like he was afraid they might reach for something they didn't have the right to touch. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." I didn't answer. I waited. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the locks, for the listing, for all of it." He said it the way people read something they've rehearsed, careful, measured, like each word had been checked for the least amount of damage. I listened anyway. "Why?" I asked. His eyes dropped to the table. "I was desperate," he said. "Divorce, business, debt. I couldn't see a way out. And then I thought about the house. I kept telling myself I was helping you, that you'd be better off somewhere smaller." "But it wasn't for me," I said. He swallowed. "No," he admitted. "It was for me." There it was, plain finally. "You didn't ask," I said. "I didn't think you'd say yes." He looked up then, and for a second I saw the old habit in him, the belief that if he framed it the right way, I would soften. "If I had asked," he said, "if I'd told you the truth, would you have helped me?" I didn't answer quickly. I didn't want to punish him with silence. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd forced me to carry. "Maybe," I said at last, "if you'd been honest, if you'd respected me enough to ask instead of taking. But you didn't ask, David. You installed locks I couldn't open. You called me confused. You tried to sell my home like I was already gone." He stared at his hands. Rebecca's pen scratched once on the paper. "Do you want to discuss future contact terms?" she asked. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man who tried to turn my safety into a down payment. "I'm not ready for regular contact," I said. "If there's an emergency, you contact me through Rebecca, not by phone, not by showing up, in writing, and only for something truly urgent." He nodded. "Okay? And you need to understand something else," I continued. My voice didn't shake this time. "I'm not your retirement plan. I'm not a problem you solve by taking control. If you want any relationship with me, it has to be built on respect, real respect." He swallowed again. "What if I mess up?" he asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just told him the truth the way a judge had told him the truth. "Then we're done," I said. "Respect or nothing." I told him where the line was. He could take it or leave it. I moved back into my house 3 weeks after the hearing. Barbara helped me carry my things from her guest room. It wasn't much, a suitcase, a few books, and the certified copy of the protective order I kept in my purse like a second set of lungs. When we pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment and looked at the front door. The deadbolt was new, shiny, solid, and for the first time since all this began, the keys on my ring were only mine. Inside, the furniture hadn't moved, the kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, but the air felt lighter, like something heavy had been carried out while I wasn't looking. I walked room to room slowly, letting my fingertips brush the door frames and the backs of chairs, reclaiming the ordinary. My bedroom door was just a door again. Tony had removed the lock the same day he changed the front deadbolt. It opened from the inside. It stayed open unless I chose to close it. That first night, I slept like my body finally believed me. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt a routine that belonged to me. On Sunday mornings, I went back to St. Catherine's. Fourth pew, left side. A few people still whispered, but fewer than I expected. Barbara sat beside me. So did Helen, another widow, who didn't ask questions. She just touched my elbow during the hymn like a quiet message. I believe you. In the afternoons, I went back to my garden. The beds had grown wild while I was gone. Weeds tangled in the roses, leaves packed into the corners. I pulled and trimmed and mulched in the cool November air until my back ached in a way that felt earned. I had every exterior lock rekeyed, front, back, garage. I stood close while Tony worked, listening to the clean metallic clicks as each cylinder turned into something new. When he finished, he handed me 3 keys on a plain ring. "That's it," he said. "Nobody else has these." "Good," I replied. 1 key stayed on my everyday ring. 1 went into my safe deposit box at the bank. The 3rd I sealed in a small lockbox in my closet, just in case, but this time the phrase belonged to me, not to David. My circle got smaller. I skipped the noisy church events where curiosity masqueraded as concern. I kept my friendships close and my boundaries clear. Barbara, Helen, my sister's voice on the phone every Sunday evening. And slowly, the house stopped feeling like a place I'd defended. It started feeling like home again. It felt bigger when I was the only one with keys. 6 months later, I was still in my house. David didn't call. He emailed through Rebecca's office. Short messages, careful words, therapy, and I'm trying. I didn't promise him anything back. Some relationships don't get rebuilt with apologies. They get rebuilt with time and distance. My life got small in the best way. Sunday service, coffee with Barbara, a phone call with my sister every week, the garden thriving again because my hands were back in it. And the keys on my ring were simple. Front door, back door, safe deposit box. Nothing I had to ask permission to use. I kept the paperwork in a folder, the police case number, the APS assessment, the certified mail receipts. Not because I wanted to relive it, because I wanted proof. If someone says it's for your safety while they take your freedom, document everything. Keep your receipts. Call for help the moment the door stops opening from your side. If this story resonated, please share it with someone who needs it.